thinks that divided the paintings and looks like that sharp pointer edging.
I have to tell stories about your work myself right now, but you can do it in a little while.
You can make them like that.
Okay.
You want me to help? You want to help
Yeah.
me
In
get
the
the
upper right
chair?
corner,
There's a chair for you right here.
Yeah, if you rotate
there was
it
a
over.
hole in the painting,
Yeah.
and I repaired it myself. You'll probably see.
I worked on it last night a little bit too.
Wax and all that.
Um,
That painting was in the Metropolitan Museum back then.
We can
In
talk.
exhibition.
we have a chair for you right here. We have to get started.
I thought I was on it, no.
Do you mind taking a seat?
Okay, Arthur, we're gonna sit
We
right
can stand
here.
up later.
Okay?
Hello, Arthur. Jack.
You can sit next to Jack.
I did work on that last
How
night.
do you spell Jack? Never
So
mind.
use the
Have your lunch.
paper towel.
So Arthur, we gave you a good view of the painting.
I seem to know him.
Okay. So I thank you to everybody for coming today and taking time out of your schedule to be here. I really appreciate it very much, and it's been a tremendous journey for me to be here today. And I'm not just talking about the traffic on Starwood Drive. It's many different ways. I'm also amazed. I'm here today because of the amazing support of many people in this room. And I'm really happy to meet the new people who've come here today to join our group of supporters. I also want to give my deepest thanks, here he is, to Herb Gray and Mary Lou for hosting this event at this wonderful place. And we're looking forward to telling you about the film and then going for the tour of Herb's amazing collection a little bit later. This film, as a lot of you know, is called Release from Reason, which came from a statement that my father gave to the Smithsonian Institute in his oral history in 1972, which he denies ever saying, but it's actually on the internet. I found it. And he said, in a world where in a world where reason is the goal, art is the release from reason. So that's where we got the title. But anyway, I'd like to, this is my executive producer and friend, Eric Grunebaum, and he's going to tell you a little bit about what we have planned this evening. So I'm going to hand it over to Eric.
Thank you all. So happy that you're here with us. We've got a lot of great things planned. We have some great and esteemed speakers, Catherine French, Judith Bookbinder, and Erica Hirschler. Really looking forward to hearing them. And then after that, Gabriel will talk about his experiences making the film so far. We have more to go. We'll screen a short sample reel of footage, which will be representative of the kinds of things you'll see in the film, but it won't be the film itself. And we'll answer questions and have a discussion about that, talk about any subjects that come up. And then for the grand finale, as Gabriel mentioned, we will go and visit our gracious hosts, Herb and Mary Lou's home, where they have an outstanding collection of art. So looking forward to it, and let's get started.
It's a rotating mic. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our guest speakers, and we have 3 people speaking tonight, and the first speaker is Catherine French. She's Director Emerita of Danforth Art in Framingham, and she's also a longtime friend of my father's from when they worked together at BU in the 1970s, and she can tell you about that. And she's also been a subject in the film and a very helpful supporter in many ways for the production of the film. So, Catherine, thank you for coming, and it's all yours.
So I actually have to say I feel like I'm an esteemed presence, first because Arthur, but Erica and Judy have been people who've done research in the field and that I feel privileged to be colleagues with. So I'm going to speak in a kind of more personal way. I've known Arthur since I was 23 and a slide librarian at Boston University. I thoroughly enjoyed his mechanist approach to treasuring glass lantern slides. If anybody knows Arthur well, they know that he is someone who enjoys history, a surreal sense of time, and a profound knowledge of metaphysical appearances in the universe. He's really somebody that held sway when I was 23, and I feel like I've been running to catch up with you ever since, Arthur. So he's one of the most important painters in a whole group of important painters. We are so privileged in Boston. I don't know why or how it happened, but every now and then there appears to be a group of painters, a group of artists, a group of writers who really inspire each other. And that certainly was true at the museum school when Arthur was a student there. He was in the group with David Aronson, Reed Kay. They were certainly influenced by Hyman Bloom and Jack Levine. That was the tenor of Boston. Hyman Bloom and Jack Levine were called the bad boys from Boston, and they really were. They were really mixing things up. So at a time when painting was had a certain look, Boston Impressionism had a certain look. The Boston Expressionists were really doing something that nobody else was doing. This was being done by a group of 23, 24, 25-year-old students at the museum school who were fresh out. They really had a new way of looking at things. De Kooning and Jackson Pollock credited them with the formation of abstract expressionism. But in Boston here, we had a very specific look. These artists remained figural. They remained in love with color. So if you look at the paintings that are here, these paintings are based in an observation of what you might observe in reality, but very immersed in a dreamlike quality, a sense of the subconscious, and loved color, loved gesture. I'm just so privileged to be working with these painters, and somebody asked me tonight, well, what are you going to do next now that you've retired? I think logically I'm going to write a book, so how could I? So thank you, Gabriel, for asking me here tonight. I'm happy to help you answer questions, but I'm going to turn you over to invite the next speaker to come up. So thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And our next speaker is Judith Bookbinder, and she's the author of Boston Modern: Figurative Expression as Alternative Modernism, and the book includes mention of both of my parents and their artwork. My mother, Lois Tarlow, is also a well-known Boston painter. So Judith, thank you for coming, and it's all yours. Thank you.
Catherine alluded to the fact that we are privileged to have the legacy of a group of artists who came together for a time in a very dynamic and creative cross-pollinization process that occurred over decades and produced produced some wonderful paintings and sculptures, and perhaps most important, in turn have gone on to inspire and influence other painters, younger painters in continuing generations. Arthur in particular certainly has created a body of work which speaks to that cross-pollinization, that cross-fertilization of an appreciation for the material quality of color in particular, and the texture of paint, as well as bringing to that a deep spiritual engagement and involvement, and that sings out in all his work. It's there in his work. It's also there in Hyman Bloom's work and others of his group. Why then, though, do we need to have to go beyond that? The paintings exist, the sculptures in some cases exist, so that's done. The teaching has been done, the passing on has occurred. And I think the wonderful thing about Gabriel's project is that it bears in mind the fact that that legacy can only remain rich and vibrant if it continues in some format that is accessible to the future. Many of the works and authors' orientation speak to the future also, just as they come out of his experience that is in the past, perhaps, but they speak to the future, and through films, through books. I'm privileged to have been someone who could contribute in that permanent way to concretizing the work of this group. Through films, through books, through exhibitions and catalogs, and the direct contact with these works, that's how the works of and the accomplishment of Arthur can continue into the future, and I hope they do. I want to say one more thing, and that is another aspect which I don't know if Gabriel is touching upon this in the film, but I am particularly conscious of, is that Arthur comes out of an immigrant experience, and as did most of the other artists who were part of the the figurative expressionist group in Boston. And they came out of poor homes that, as one, or actually two of the people I've interviewed have said, we were poor, but we didn't feel poor, and I think that's true. But nonetheless, they came out of homes that were not part of, one would think, of the integrated community, and yet they achieved so much, and that speaks to the future as well. It speaks to other, the experiences of other immigrant groups now and even into the future. And so I see Arthur's work as part of this continuum and part of the continuing sense of the inspiration that comes through his work. So, thank you.
I have the honor of introducing Erica Hirschler. We're very happy she's here tonight, and not only do we almost share a surname, but she is the Kroll Senior Curator of American Paintings at the Museum of Fine Arts here in Boston, and we're very happy to have you here tonight. Thank you.
Well, it's a huge pleasure for me to be here and an honor to represent the museum tonight. And I think my remarks are well suited to follow Judy's, because the museum is in it for the long haul, and we think about what stories we want to survive us that we can tell through works of art. And we also feel strongly that we need to be inclusive and constantly thinking about what kinds of stories we want to tell. I know that a lot of people have felt that the museum has paid not requisite attention to this material in the past, and I am here to tell you that we are at a great period of transition, not only for the museum, but for the field of 20th century art history, and that's what I wanted to talk about. And also to express that it's going to be films like this that are going to help scholars of the future really understand the art of the past. If only we had films for the art of the 19th or the 18th century, we would know a lot more. So I'm applauding the film effort. I'm saying we're at a moment of great transition because I can tell you that our collection has changed tremendously since I began to work at the Museum of Fine Arts. There was a moment, yes, when all Boston art was contained within the Boston School umbrella, if I can put it that way. But it has changed, beginning with some significant gifts to the collection. One thinks, for example, of the Hyman Blooms that came to us with the gift of William and Saundra Lane, gifts that have come from the family, from the Aronson family, gifts that will come in the future. And we really are starting to build a collection that represents a larger picture of what art in Boston was like during the 20th century, but also a bigger picture of what 20th century art in America was all about. Our histories have very much leaned towards abstraction. And the great story of 20th century American art that's been told so far has been a story of the rise of abstraction and of abstract expressionism, supposedly the most quintessential American style. What I'm starting to see now as a scholar are people starting to question that trajectory. And we're going to know very, very soon, I think, in new works of art history, that there is an equal history of figurative art in the 20th century that is right on through. There was no taking over by abstraction. There is a long history of the figurative tradition in American art, and we're going to start seeing people tell that story. I will also say that the museum itself is at a point of transition. Most of you know that we've just named a new director, Matthew Teitelbaum, who is starting at the MFA on August 3rd. We're all thrilled and excited about that. And I know that one of the things that Matthew feels very deeply about is what Judy was talking about, that art of the past needs to speak to people of the present through issues that resonate with their own experience, whether they are visual or social or historical issues. They need to come alive and speak to a diverse audience that is the audience of our museum and of our city as it continues to grow and to change. So we're very excited about what's coming next in a variety of different ways. And I want to thank all of you for engaging with it and being a part of it. And I can't wait to see this film, which is going to teach me a lot about the history of art, about this movement in Boston, and I think a lot about philosophy in the world as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica, for that very, very informative speech about what's happening at the MFA and the history of art in Boston. And it has a great connection to the film. And this film started as a small personal project. When my father was approaching his late 80s, I just decided to go over with a camcorder and capture his art and his humor and this very unusual art-filled Victorian house that he lives in, which is actually a character in the movie. It takes some explanation that I don't have time for here, but every inch is filled with artwork and piles of news clippings and photographs about his career and the history of art in Boston in the 20th century. And he pulls all of that out and shares it on camera. And he has wonderful stories as a participant and an observer, and almost as an historian about this period of art in Boston. So as the film progressed, it turned into a much larger feature-length documentary film that's both biographical and historic about his life and his career, but also about a film that needs to be made about Boston Expressionism. Even though some of these artists don't call themselves expressionists, they just call themselves painters. It's a title to describe this important period in art, which needs a greater resource for people to learn about, as Erica was mentioning. So with direct access to my father and his world of art, I felt that I was in a perfect position to make this film and expand it into a much deeper story. And it's been a labor of love, and it's been my main project for the past few years. As I was filming my father, he started to pull out thousands of drawings and prints and paintings. And this is the house I grew up in. This is where he still lives. And a lot of these portfolios were shoved behind the couches when I was a little kid, but I didn't really see them until I made this movie. And every piece of artwork had a story behind it. Stories about his life and about his fellow artists at the time, and again about the history of art in Boston. For example, he was talking about watching his father, a Russian immigrant tailor, where my father grew up in Lynn, drawing shirt patterns on cardboard, and that's how my father became interested in drawing at a very young age. And his talents led to a Boston Museum School scholarship, a traveling fellowship to the booming art scene of post-World War II Paris in 1948. And it was an amazing time. He was there with his fellow students and other friends like Ellsworth Kelly, and he shares all these amazing stories on camera and photographs and paintings. When he returned to Boston, this Boston Expressionist movement was gaining national recognition at that time, and there's many stories to tell, which we don't have time for, but there was the Boris Mirsky Gallery in Boston, where my father was represented for 27 years, along with many of the other artists that were in Paris and that are also hanging on the wall at her graves. And some of those paintings will be seen in the film as well. So my father pulled out these portfolios of drawings he did in Paris. Most of them, of course, were of beautiful women. And one of them was a girlfriend he had at the time, and I discovered that she's alive and well and living in Western Mass. And I did a great interview with her, and she had this amazing black and white Super 8 footage of them together in Paris and some of these other artists. It's sort of like a Fellini movie. She was in the Merce Cunningham dance troupe, so there were these theater people with masks and artists, so we'll see a little bit of that in the clip. And I shot a lot of cinema verite footage, dozens of hours of, well, my father likes to tell stories, as you know, and they're wonderful stories. So I've been going over and filming him drawing and painting and telling the stories. And I started interviewing, the first curator I interviewed, I believe, was Nick Capasso, who at the time was the head curator of the Decordova Museum. And he said, I said, what would you like to say about my father? And he said, he was an immensely influential artist and teacher and one of the most important Boston painters of the 20th century, period. So I ended up doing 30 more interviews with curators, collectors, scholars to find out what Nick meant. When I was growing up, my father didn't talk very much about his career and this side of his life. I saw some of it happening. So through the process of making this film, it really has been quite a journey for me, and I've learned so much about his place in this part of art history. And I've met some really wonderful people, fellow artists, some that he went to college with in the 40s, and curators and collectors, many of who are in this room, as I mentioned before. I also, I mentioned I filmed, my father opened a studio to my cameraman, which is a rare thing, and of course was demonstrating his drawing and painting and talking a lot about his philosophies of art and life. And when I interviewed his students, even 40 years later, they were telling me that he had a very profound effect on their lives as artists, their work, and just their way of looking at life that they still remember today. And I was really touched to hear that, and I'm glad I was able to capture that on film. It's also partially a generational tale about my whole family of unconventional artists, and we explore that in the film as well. But without going any further, I'd like to show a 7-minute sample reel, and this is not, again, it's not a fully realized story. It's more of a rough edit to show you some of the content available and some of the themes that the film will explore. So give us 1 minute to turn off these lights, and then we'll show you footage.